Hi, I'm Kennedy,
And I'm Saydi.
and this week we read from A Search for Common Ground in Chapter 4 on the achievement gap. So I'm going to start talking about Pedro, and then Sadie will talk about Rick. So one of the things that Pedro was talking about was how there's lots of gaps in funding and educational opportunity, and that's kind of where the idea of the achievement gap comes from. Is there's a lot of places where it's inequitable, it's not very fair. Some schools get a lot more funding than other schools, more support, more resources, and that makes it difficult for the students to achieve as much. But he also talks about how there's race and poverty that plays a big role in that as well, and how it's important to acknowledge those things and see how all of that kind of holistically causes this so-called achievement gap. In fact, there are lots of racially separated schools with still less than 10% of white students in them, and historically the white students, because of all of the issues back in the day and currently, tend to be more of the middle class, the upper, with more funding that gets pushed towards them because there's more funds. Like we read before, their parents give more, and therefore there's more funds because they're less poor. And so he says that instead of calling it the achievement gap, it would be more accurate to call it the opportunity gap, which I very much so agree with. Because
I think that's good.
When this isn't anything to do with what the students are doing. The students don't have control over their race. They don't have control over their poverty level. I mean, so when we're saying that the students aren't achieving, that's probably true, right? They're not reaching the same levels of grades or whatnot. The test scores are different. But really it's not their fault, and it's the opportunities that are given to them are limited because their programs are less robust. And so I think it is really fair to say that the opportunity gap is more of an accurate way to describe it. Like he says, he also said that just the more support students have at home, the more support students have at home, the better they do in school. And so once again, that contributes to the opportunity, because if their parents aren't providing them with those opportunities to learn at home as well, it's not as helpful in school. So just we have to look at all of the different sides and understand where students are coming from to see what their opportunities are, to see why they're not achieving.
Totally. Rick's had a lot of similar points. I feel like they agreed on pretty similar things.
For sure.
One of his big things was that poverty does play a big role in the achievement gap, because those kids don't have the ability to go to as good as schools most of the time because of where they live and everything, which is also he brought up the fact of that's why school choice is super important, so that these kids who are poor have the opportunity to go to better schools where they can get a better education and learn more. He also touches on how family structure and individual behavior, they're also really big factors when it comes to achievement and the achievement gap, because people who have both their parents at home, he was saying, it's a lot easier for them to have a parent helping them and be focused on their schooling and everything, opposed to when they only have one parent at home who's having to work and do all the cleaning and help them with school. They get a lot less attention, and their achievement is a lot lower than it would be if they had more parents at home or whatever. So family structure does affect the achievement gap a lot too, he was saying. He was also saying that race does make a little bit of a difference, because race also kind of affects your wealth, as we've discussed in earlier chapters, but also we were saying it really just depends on kids' behavior and their own motivation. If they are willing to put in the work in school and do what they need to get good grades and everything. So I thought that was kind of a big part of his argument, whether the kids themselves are willing to put forth the effort to do well in their classes and everything. He said that the lowest poverty rate, people have the lowest poverty if they complete high school, get a full-time job and wait to have kids until they get married, which I thought was kind of interesting. He pointed that out, that those are the people who are the most successful and not poor. And overall, yeah, he was just talking about how they need to embrace their education, students, and be willing to learn and put forth the effort to be able to get good grades and to close the achievement gap. So, yeah, it was good.
It was interesting how they mostly agreed.
Yeah, they did.
Yeah, that one point was pretty much the only thing that they didn't agree on. So, yeah. Okay, so now we're going to move on to the practice section. So, as a teacher, I just want to do my best to provide my students with that opportunity so that the achievement gap can hopefully be lessened.
Yes.
Because I feel like as educators, we are able to give our students so many opportunities if we put in the work.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's, as we've talked about, there's a lot of factors that come into why it's not 100% possible to do everything for them all the time. But I think there's a lot of things that we can do as educators that I can add in my classroom to support these students and make sure that they're getting the best education and the resources that they need and the tools that they need for learning. And so another thing that we can do as educators is to draw attention to these issues and just try and confront them in our own classrooms, in our school districts, and just kind of use our voices to say, hey, like, as an educator, this is what I'm seeing, and it's not very fair. And we need to bring equity for these students and lower this achievement gap. And how do we do that? By increasing opportunities for these students who have less.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with what you said. In my classroom, I'm going to make sure I give the students the time and attention that they need for their education, because some students do need a lot more help and resources than other students need. So I think it will be really important in my class that I'm giving the students who do need that extra help the time and attention so that they can, like you were saying, that we can close the achievement gap and so they can get a just as good an education as the students who are getting a better education at home and are just smarter and everything. I also like, though, that in my classroom I want to, the kids who are really smart, I do want to challenge them still, though. It was talking about in the book that it is important to challenge the kids who already are pretty high up and achieve too.
Yeah.
So give them the opportunity to continue growing as well, instead of having to stay at like this young level that they may be way above. So I think it's going to be really important in my classroom to tailor specifically to the needs of all of the individual students, to give the ones who need more help, and the ones who want to be challenged more, the ability to be challenged more. So yeah, I think that's all going to be really important.
Yeah, that's a really good point. That, like, oftentimes you bring it to the lowest level of the students, but there are those kids, and that's a really good thing to do in your classroom. Yeah. So now for the reflection. I think overall, kind of the message is that so many of these students that are a part of this achievement gap are in that category because they were born into it. They're born into poverty. It's not their fault. There's nothing that they can really do as a small child to lower the achievement gap, you know? And so I think we have to be able to find solutions to help them and help them see their potential and just put in the effort on our part as the adults in their lives and provide their parents with resources because their parents can be huge supports, like we talked about in the home. Learning is so important as well. So helping those students receive the best resources that they can. And just, yeah, I really like the idea of it really is an opportunity gap rather than an achievement gap because it puts it on less of the student's fault and really takes it to the problem. And then we can see why those students aren't achieving as much because of their opportunities. So, yep, I just think that focus of shifting it from it's the student's fault and how do we fix the student to how do we fix the issues that surround why the students aren't.
I totally agree. And yeah, I think it is super important that, like this chapter was talking about, to give the kids who need it the extra support and love that they need in the classroom to do the best that they can. Because yes, not everyone came from some great background and has all this prior education and good preschool and everything, like other kids do. And so I think it's really important that we support kids in what they need and give them the attention that they need. And also, I do think it's also important that they realize and start putting forth effort as well, like they were talking about, that it's really important for them to also work hard and put forth effort so that they can all try to succeed, because anyone can succeed if they're willing to put forth the effort and try hard. So yeah,
Totally.